And hello, everybody. Welcome to FSU Coach Live. My name is Tim Baghurst, and today's guest is Jess Weiss. She is a head coach of field hockey. Jess, thank you so much for joining me. If you wouldn't mind, just give us a little bit of background of how you got into field hockey and then became head coach.
Sure. Thanks so much for having me. It's really great to see you again. I appreciate it. And yeah, I'm from Philadelphia originally. We're a huge sports family. So I've been playing sports of all kinds since I was young. Went on to play field hockey and lacrosse in college. And my college coach at the time knew that I was trying to go through this decision-making process of did I want to stick with the business and finance world, or did I want to kind of move towards my true passion, which is people. And Amy Cohen, my coach at the time, gave me a chance to be on her staff right after graduation. So spent a semester coaching for her, coaching field hockey at Susquehanna University, which is my alma mater. And I was fortunate enough to get my first full-time coaching job at Christopher Newport, coaching lacrosse actually at like I said, at Christopher Newport. And yeah, just kind of went from there, started to coach two sports. So I was coaching field hockey and lacrosse at a fairly high level for a few years, and then found myself with an opportunity to switch to field hockey full time. And field hockey just kind of works with my brain a little bit better than lacrosse does. So kind of steered towards that. I'd been playing field hockey a lot longer than lacrosse, and it's funny, I got into it because I thought it looked like a lot of fun, but I didn't want to wear the kilt that everyone else was wearing. So I ended up being a goalkeeper in middle school. I'll never forget my middle school coach, Mr. Riley. So that was hilarious. And, he said, you can still play and not wear it. There's a spot for you in the goal. So I started off in that. And, the goal at the time was looked like a backyard fence. So we've come a really far way here in field hockey. But so yeah, spent 7 years at Christopher Newport and then came here to Randolph, Macon in January 2016, and I've been the head coach here ever since.
Interesting. You talked about having to make a decision. To me, the first thing I thought when you said that was, do you want to work with people or do you want to make money? And you're laughing. Being a head coach in a sport, even a collegiate head coach, does not necessarily mean that you have the resources and finances that you might otherwise have in a different job.
So true. That is, honestly, I say all the time, you can't take it with you. So while it would be nice to potentially be making double or triple what I'm making right now doing something else, the experiences that I'm having while I'm here are, I think, really invaluable. I'm not so sure how happy I would be as a person if I were doing what I was supposed to be doing as a student in school. Just not really sure that my passions lined up to that. And I've seen a lot, done a lot. I've crossed paths with a lot of people, not just in sport, but in the communities where I've lived because of my jobs. And I'm not quite sure that I would trade that for any amount of money. It would be nice to have a little bit more, I won't lie. But at the end of the day, people and relationships are the most important thing in life. And I'm very, very lucky to have the ones that I have. So again, it would be nice to have a little bit more, but at the same point, this job is so obscure and so different. And there are so many inner workings of it that I'm not sure that I would be as happy doing anything else.
And we should remind everybody watching, if you have a question for Jess, just put it in your chat box and then we'll get to it ASAP. When you think about coaching, you've been coaching for several years now, and especially as a head coach at RMC. What are some of the things that you've learned along the way that maybe you wish you had known before you became a head coach?
Oh gosh, hitting me with a good one to start. I would say honestly that I think I just thought that I knew everything when I was an assistant. When you do something for 7 years, you think you've seen it all and done it all and know what you're doing, but this job brings something new every single day. And there are things that came across my desk in the first 5 days of being a head coach that I just thought to myself, wow, I really didn't know what I thought I did. So I think I don't know if being a little bit more humble is the right word, but it probably is. And of course, a little confidence is always good. But I think just being able to step back and realize that I don't know everything, and that the job of this seat is very different than the seat of an assistant coach. And I didn't quite have a full understanding of that.
Do you
I
think
think
part of that, sorry to interrupt, do you think part of that is maybe your responsibility as head coach now to prepare assistant coaches to become head coaches, to look, here are some things that I wasn't prepared for? Or is it just a case of until you've sat in that chair, you don't really get it, understand?
I think it's a combination of both. So I absolutely love, I mean, my favorite part of the job, I love field hockey, don't get me wrong, but my favorite part of the job is the mentoring aspect. And I think that is something that I carry very heavily myself. So I do put a lot of time and effort into making sure that I do that for my staff and obviously for our student athletes. But I think I joked around the other day that there's a podcast, I believe it was Sherry Cole who talked about this from Oklahoma. And she said, decide, 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 decide. That's all you do as a head coach is just decide. And as an assistant, you watch someone else decide and you can chime in and say what you think. But at the end of the day, you don't have to make the decision. And the lead up to the decision, the relaying the decision, and then the dealing with the decision you made, those steps are just something that you don't ever carry by nature as an assistant. So I think the decision piece is so heavy, but yeah, of course the mentoring piece as well. Again, everyone takes that role differently, but that's something that I carry very heavily, and I take a lot of pride in, and I think is very valuable. So it adds a little bit, but the decision making piece is heavy for sure.
One of the things that has really changed in collegiate coaching over the years is recruiting. Another one now is NIL, name, image, and likeness, and we also see the transfer portal coming in. If I can start with the transfer portal and NIL, have you had to deal with any of that yet?
Not too much. We have had some student athletes inquire about it. You know, they've been able to create partnerships and be brand ambassadors a little bit more openly. So that's definitely been an opportunity for them. And I think for Division III student athletes in particular, it gives them a little bit more of a platform to get themselves out there, because I do think while Division II is fairly misunderstood, I think there is a misconception about the level of commitment, athleticism, you know, time, effort, work ethic that Division III student athletes put in. So I think being able to partner and get themselves out there with some different brands and be recognized a little bit more is probably more beneficial. We haven't had any issues or anything like that, just a few questions. Our compliance officer has been great about relaying all that information, but we've had no major issues with it. And then the transfer portal, we haven't had anyone enter the transfer portal. That's not to say we haven't had any student athletes transfer, but I have had the opportunity to browse it. And if someone has a release, been able to contact people through it. So I haven't landed anyone from the transfer portal, but it is definitely good to know. So that way I can go on if we have a specific need, go on, look, and kind of see what I can potentially get to, you know, help my current squad.
We've got a question coming for you in the chat box in a second, but going back to recruiting, then how do you, it's a Division III school. How do you get talent into that school, knowing that you're competitive, you want to be successful? Not only do you want to train people, but you want to win. At the same time, Division III doesn't have the monetary incentives that other universities, Division I and II, might have. How do you get those people in? How do you train them to make sure that you are? It has to be hard.
It is probably the biggest challenge for sure, but related back to what we initially started talking about with the experience and the finances, I really just try to talk about the experience here. And there is a little bit of a different mindset. So in Division I, you know, you're practicing a majority of the spring. It's coach led or strength and conditioning coach led. You have to be really self-motivated or peer motivated to be a Division III student athlete, because we only get 5 weeks with you. we're only monitoring those practices for probably 30 hours. So if you don't have it within you to either listen to your peers, absorb that information, and want to work out for them, or want to work out for yourself, you're going to have a really difficult time being a Division III student athlete, and you're probably not going to hit the goals that you want to hit. So that's obviously not to say that there aren't Division I and Division II athletes that feel the same way. They obviously do, but there's a lot less oversight from a coaching standpoint. So it's a lot more student athlete driven in terms of the off-season work. So we also have a program here where I really try to highlight different pieces of developing character and giving them leadership opportunities with our leadership group that's based in our 4 foundational pieces. So I really try to sell the experience in terms of what they're going to get out of it that is more beneficial. What is often overlooked as well is, while the sticker price might be incredibly high, the average scholarship could potentially knock that in half. So there are a lot of misconceptions about that as well, that, oh, I'm getting a $5,000 scholarship to go here. Well, if you had your academic scholarship here, plus your grants, plus this and that, FAFSA and all that, you might be down to a comparable price, and this might outweigh that experience there. So it is definitely difficult. I said the word sell, but I feel like I don't have to sell where I'm at. This is very much like Susquehanna University. So I feel like I don't have to sell this. I am a product of this experience, sitting here and living it. So the liberal arts Division III experience is, it's very unique. I studied abroad and had a job in another country. I was in a sorority. I played 2 sports. I had jobs on campus. I got to do everything I wanted to do, play the sport I love. And, despite the post-collegiate career choice, was able to pay off my student loans in a timely manner, and something that I didn't think was too overwhelming. So again, I'm a lived experience of what I'm trying to market as what I think is a really beneficial experience. So it is really difficult, but I am very real with people. I'm very transparent. What they get during the recruiting process is what they get on a daily basis for practice. So I'm not going to put on a recruiting mask and then take it off. I just think it's really important to be incredibly transparent, and that's how we are with our players. That's how we are with people on staff. And, to me, there's no sense in selling something and then giving them a different product, because then everyone's disappointed. So we just try to lay out exactly what they can get out of this. And it's not for everybody. This school is pretty particular. I'm very particular. So I know I'm not everyone's cup of tea, and that's fine. There are plenty other drinks out there. So if I'm not your cup of tea, that's totally fine. There's hundreds of field hockey programs out there. So if, I'm not a fit, or the school is not a fit, I just want people to be happy and find the right place that's a fit for them, because it's a big investment.
All right, let's get to some questions. We've got one from LA Lane. You're actively involved in the NFHCA, the Field Hockey Coaches Association. What would your advice be to younger coaches who may be nervous about becoming involved?
So you're not alone. I was nervous as well. I've been coaching field hockey for a decade, and it took me until this past year to volunteer myself to be involved in the NFHCA. But now that I'm here and doing that, I'm the co-chair of a committee, and I wouldn't say it's a lot of work. It's important work, and you have to be intentional about your time, but it is important, and we're member driven. And I think nerves are normal. Anything is new, a new job, a new house, a new position, whatever it may be. But, you're not alone. Everyone's nervous when they start something new, but, you never know how great you're going to be, or what skill set you might sharpen, or how you're going to become a better leader by joining. So I definitely think, don't let your hesitation stop you. We're all nervous to start something new, so you're not alone.
Another question. I'm not entirely sure the exact question, but was wondering if you're touching on safe sport. We were talking earlier. Could you talk a little bit about some of the ethical challenges that you face as a coach? Can you give examples, maybe without obviously being too particular, on decisions that you have to make where there is no clear right or wrong?
Sure. So with our USA Field Hockey connection, we do take some courses on safe sport and whatnot. And, we're always taking new certifications and making sure our insurance is in line and things like that. But when you're a coach and you're running clinics, you have your LLC and you have younger students on campus, and, you have to make sure that you're covered from a liability standpoint. I think I've been fortunate enough to not really be caught in any major ethical dilemmas. To me, if it came down to winning or doing something wrong, I'm going to, excuse me, or doing something right, I'm going to pick the right path. So to me, it's not much of a dilemma, and I have been fortunate to be in that scenario. Of course, when it comes down to punishments and things like that based on teammates breaking rules, it's nothing's been ethical. Everything's just been a pretty straightforward piece, but I can see how with money and boosters and people trying to help out programs and want a little bit of a say in things, how it could get a little hairy. But I've been fortunate enough to not be in any situation whatsoever that came down to being ethical. So I guess I'm lucky. I should knock on wood for now that I haven't been put in that situation. It's a great question because I know at some levels in some institutions it's a daily thing. But I would just say people are always going to remember how you act in those scenarios. I mean, look how many wins have been vacated. Wins are, I mean, it's nothing. Who you are as a person is way more important. And we touched on this the last time we chatted a little bit, like what society wants and what we want as people don't always align in this profession. And oftentimes people will do anything it takes to win. But, circling back to the recruiting piece as well, I tell people I'd rather lose 3 extra games a year with the right people than win the conference championship with a bunch of jerks. It's just it's not worth it to me. Wins are so temporary. It's 20 days out of 365. I mean, it's such a minority. It's not even close. So yeah, to me, it's not worth it. But people are always going to remember what decision you make, and the wins are going to come and go.
Another question for you, Mamie Donahue, Coach Weiss. How pumped are you to coach in a post-COVID world? Are there any silver linings from the COVID coaching experience?
Yeah, great question. I mean, it's just so much easier. The COVID world was definitely a difficult one to navigate. We've been fortunate enough to be a fall sport. So this past year, winter sports were really impacted by the new wave, and we were fairly unscathed in the fall. But I mean, I think it helped all of us realize what's really important. And that, again, kind of goes back to what I've been touching on all along, is that people and relationships are the most important thing. So being able to retouch on that, we missed a lot of the face-to-face communication with our student athletes, them coming into the office and, sitting on the couch and just chit-chatting about who knows what is, such a huge part of the day. So to not have that, honestly, it was really tough. But I think being a head coach, I've entrusted my assistants to do so much of the face-to-face stuff with our student athletes, and missing out on that almost twofold really helped me personally get back in touch with my student athletes, and just really, things kind of, the ship runs itself after a certain point. But I forgot how much I enjoyed just checking in about their academics and seeing how their classes are going, or how's the adjustment to their new roommate, or whatever the case may be. So I am very pumped, Mamie. Thank you. I'm super excited about it. I mean, I think most of us are ready to not have to mention it on a daily basis. So to be able to kind of move forward and just, hug my players after a really exciting moment, or when they're shedding tears on senior day, like we didn't really have the chance to do that last season. So to have the opportunity to do that this year, and to hopefully continue doing that moving forward, there aren't words for it.
Yeah. You're female, coaching a female sport in Division III, and you're coaching a sport that doesn't necessarily get a lot of visibility around the world, outside of maybe the Olympics every 4 years. How do you create that exposure that allows you to stay relevant, that allows you to compete with some of the other sports that maybe, well, it's football, we've got to give them, and then we'll look at you kind of attitude? How do you fight that? that perception, or maybe those just norms that shouldn't be there, but a lot of times are?
Yeah, that's a great question. I mean, definitely field hockey is way more of an international sport. It gets a lot more attention and love overseas compared to here.
Agreed.
So, which is ironic considering we're the only country that has a collegiate system that supports the sport. So it is a little bit ironic, but at the same point, yeah, I mean, I try to tell our players, listen, it doesn't matter what sport is happening here or whether they're male athletes. Like, we are we are putting in the same effort, the same work and all of that that everyone else is, but a lot of what we've tried to say too is like them with playing time. Make them see you. Make them want to come watch you. Like we can't just sit here and accept that, yeah, maybe we're not the first thing that people want to watch on a Saturday afternoon, but make some noise and make people want to come here as opposed to, watching the fourth quarter of the football game where the team's already blown out the visitor, which has happened more often than not. So I think just continuing to highlight the importance of not settling for what we have and constantly working for more visibility. It is a constant challenge. I was looking at a chart just yesterday, and the number of participants in lacrosse is, in youth lacrosse is double what we are, where that didn't used to be the case. So, we're hovering around, I think, 5 or 6,000 youth participants for lacrosse is up to about 11. So, we are definitely behind in that sense. We weren't as proactive in the youth aspect and getting the sport sustained over time. But
Why do you think that is? Is it facilities? Because, field hockey requires a big space, typically AstroTurf, specific dimensions. Is it just a case of finances?
I think a lot of what you do see is field hockey played on, water-based AstroTurf. That's expensive.
Mm-hmm.
So most Division III institutions are playing on a shared facility, and they're either sharing with football and soccer, and lacrosses, or they're just sharing with one other sport. It's pretty rare to have your own facility. So from a collegiate sponsorship standpoint at the Division I level, yeah, it's a really hefty investment. So I think, we have a lot of youth programs. USA Field Hockey has a million opportunities for youth, but we do have a great committee on the NFHCA, the Sport Development Committee, that is currently working on that, and they're partnering with USA Field Hockey. But our Sport Development Committee is forging ahead with trying to figure out why. Like, how did we miss the boat? How have we not grown as quickly as we should have, or as quickly as other sports that, we're probably still a quote unquote emerging sport because of how low our youth participation is. But we do have great people that are, boots to the ground, really trying to figure out how we can combat that and get more people involved. From a demographic standpoint, we are also unfortunately the majority white. So I'm sure that doesn't help either. So there are some barriers to entry when it comes to race. And again, with facilities, what does access look to young people trying to play the sport? You can truly play on any surface. We have indoor field hockey, so you can play on, any indoor surface, grass, artificial turf, or, water-based turf. But yeah, there are definitely a lot of barriers, and we're fortunate to have those people on the Sport Development Committee trying to figure it out, because if we don't, I'm not so sure how bright the future of field hockey will look long term.
Megan has a question. What's the biggest lesson as a coach you've learned in the last 2 seasons?
The biggest lesson in the last 2 seasons? Honestly, how important a staff is, probably. I was coaching by myself last spring during COVID. So I would definitely say, number one, how important it is to surround yourself with people who are going to support your vision. When I've had those people on staff, it's made my job really easy. And when I've been by myself, it's been really hard. So from a professional standpoint and a staffing standpoint, I'd say that. But at the same point, our team last year during COVID, I mean, when they found out I was going to be by myself, they absolutely rallied around me unlike anything I've ever seen. So that, I think, really just kind of taught me, okay, all that time and effort that I put into this character development and the foundation and finding the right people And all of those intangibles just really came to a head, and that student athletes see more than you think, and they know more than you think. And for them to be able to kind of rally around me and just really support me was, again, just taught me that I've got the right people that are coming through this program, and I'm really fortunate to be sitting in this office. That's for sure.
I've got just a couple questions left. So if anybody watching wants to get their question in, now's the time to do it. You're a head coach. You also teach. You do a variety of things. And one of the questions that I often ask is around this idea of stress and burnout, because it's a real relevant thing in coaching. A lot of times we do way more than what our job description is what we sign. And here we are doing many other things on top of that, working on the weekends, lots of travel. How do you moderate the stress in order not to burn out? Or are you?
Well, I have definitely been burnout before. That is for sure. And I have been fortunate enough to be surrounded by a small handful of people in the coaching world that I've been able to lean on and just really be honest with them about what I've been going through. And they've helped me, draw some pretty hard boundaries. So, my two best friends that were in the coaching world at one time, or three, I guess I should say, one has been out for a little bit now, but, they've really been people that have helped me establish and draw boundaries. I've really kind of gotten to the place where there are so many things that I would carry with me and take home, and they're things that are outside my control. I've been really fortunate when I worked at Christopher Newport. There were a large majority of field hockey alums that still lived in the area. So I had a great group of people that I could spend my time with, do different things with. And then here, I really do have the greatest group of people around me here who do a variety of things, and who really just, remind me that I would be telling my players the same thing. I would be telling my players that you can't take everything home. You have to draw boundaries. And they've been phenomenal at supporting me through that. So I think just drawing boundaries, like, you, as a coach, it's natural. We're all a little bit of a control freak. So we all want to control everything. And that's not the case. Like I said before, I'm, hopefully playing 20 games a year with my players. But at the end of the day, there are so many things that are in their hands and in their control. And, the analogy I used with them the other day is, I'm providing the map and the tools, but it's up to you to start walking. So I can't go home wondering, why isn't so-and-so, why isn't she walking? Or, why isn't she doing this? Or why isn't she doing that? That becomes really tiresome. And that does kind of lead you to being burnt out. But yeah, just really having a lot of things that I can do with my different friends that I have in this area. I also took up boxing. That's been a huge stress relief. So, hit bags, not people, is what I try to tell myself. So, but no, it just really kind of allows me to get out everything, whether it's great or whether, it's bad. So when you're in a great mood and you've got a lot of joy and things to celebrate, you feel really good about yourself, and, can hit the bag a little bit harder. And when you've got things to let go, it's the perfect place to go to. So having that venue has definitely been beneficial. But, again, just going back to the people, both places I've lived, in Hampton Roads and here, I've just had the best people around me. So that's made it a lot easier to not feel burnout.
Last questions from Denise. Are there any other practices that you recommend for the mental aspect of training for your team, such as books, yoga, team building exercises?
For sure. So it's honestly, one of our pieces of our foundation is personal wellness. So a huge part of that, obviously, is mental wellness. So we spend a lot of time checking in on those different things. We have actually brought in yoga instructors in the past during preseason to kind of walk them through some different things with their breathing and their stretching. We've had, during practice, small groups. We were doing this for a few Mondays in a row, small group training where they could be in small groups of about 6 or 7 and just kind of talk about some topic for the day that we came up with. What are you struggling with most right now? What seems insurmountable? What do you want to celebrate today? So creating that openness and that vulnerability with one another has been huge. We also we've had a little bit of a disconnect from it due to COVID, but we used to do a mental health Monday in our off season where our leaders of personal wellness and social and human capital will kind of team up and just have a, you know, question of the week or the month where in partners or small groups they'd get together and kind of discuss those different things. So I've handed out books, you know, that bookshelf behind me, well, other way because it's mirrored, but that bookshelf behind me is full of different things. You know, that big blue textbook is all about sports psychology. You know, we've handed out books before. Mind Gym, I think, is a really great book, just kind of depending on what people are looking for. But that's probably one I give out most frequently. We also, during COVID, had access to the Headspace app, and our, you know, we'd put it as voluntary, but, you know, every Tuesday and Thursday in the middle of the day, you know, I would live stream a Headspace meditation for people to come if they wanted to join. So that's been really helpful. You know, I have a friend who's also a yoga instructor. She lives in California. She was nice enough to stream that during COVID. So she allowed me to share that with the team as well. So they had those different things, but mindfulness, the mental game, yoga, all that stuff, like focusing on breathing is definitely at the forefront of what we're checking on. I mean, every meeting we have with the student athlete touches on personal wellness. And yeah, if you're not right yourself, it's really hard to do anything else, which is why we have our foundation linked to a chair. So we spend a lot of time focused on the mental piece, and just really trying to work through that with people and letting them know that it's okay to not feel 100% all of the time. We had a senior say in a group activity during the fall, which this is a great example. We just took the whole day, sat in a circle and just talked about everything. And she said, like, it's going to be great some days. It's going to be horrible some days. Overall, I've loved my experience. I wouldn't want to be anywhere else, but there's days that really aren't great. And on social media, it looks like every day is great for everybody, but that's not the case. So them just being open and honest about the realness of what they go through on a daily basis has been, I think, really beneficial for a lot of them. There were a lot of tears that day, myself included, but those moments are necessary because they need to see us as human beings too, not just, you know, a robot of a coach. They need to see us as humans. They need to see each other as humans. And as like I said, at the end of the day, that's all we all are. You know, we're all just trying to make it and make the most of what we've got. So them being able to see that with each other, I think is really important. But yeah, it's a great question, but it's definitely something that we integrate as much as we possibly can.
I want to be cognizant of your time. If somebody does have a question that we couldn't get to, or maybe is watching this after the fact, what's the best way for them to reach you?
Sure. So my email address is jessicaweiss@rmc.edu. My Twitter is Coach Dubs, DUBBS RMC. So that works as well. You know, a DM there is fine as well. But the email is great. Obviously, like I just talked about boundaries, I am often checking that way more than I probably should. But yeah, if anyone does reach out, you know, I will get back to them in a timely manner. But I appreciate you sharing that info. So happy to field any other questions that come up.
Well, Jess, bad timing to get a cough in my throat. Thanks so much for joining me today. And I hope everybody watching found it useful. And of course, just a reminder, if you haven't yet liked, subscribed, followed FSU Coach, we try to do these interviews at least every couple of weeks with special guests, and hope you stay in touch and actually follow those.
Great. Thanks so much, Tim. I appreciate you having me on.
Thank you.